Okay, let's start then. Am I audible? Like, can someone type yes in the chat if I'm audible? Okay. Okay, I'll just share my screen just for a second. Okay. Like last week we discussed about a particular like learning model in theoretical machine learning. So today's discussion will be sort of a formal introduction. Like last week was, you can say, a sudden entry into some particular learning model. So today, like as Madhu suggested last week, uh, it's better if we start with some kind of formal introduction to this area. So today's discussion will be mainly oriented towards that thing. So it won't be like mathematically involved today. From next week, like we'll be more mathematically involved. So let's begin. Okay, so this will be the contents to it. Like first we'll be going to the introduction to ML, and then we'll be looking at some models. We'll be more like today's main focus will be on this particular model, and I'll just give a definition for this model, but we'll learn in detail about this model and look at some examples next week. Okay, so this is a formal introduction. So like, what's the goal of machine learning? So so in machine learning, what we try to do is like we study some kind of computer algorithm so that we can learn some kind of stuff. So what do we mean by learning? Learning can be a many type of things actually. Like it can be to complete some kind of task or make some kind of predictions. So like last week we were trying to predict using our online learning model whether it will rain or not. So learning can be of many types, and like most of, like initially you can say we focus on prediction type of stuff, but later we can move to do something more concrete. So how is learning being done? So learning is being done based on some sort of data which has been provided to us, uh, or through some direct experience, or maybe some instruction, like we program some instruction, and based on that the algorithm tries to learn. So what can be different types of examples? Like we all know these type of stuff like optical character recognition, face detection. Like all we see in FB, like they sort of identify like whose face it is, and then spam filtering, like whether the email is spam or not, and then spoken language understanding, uh, like when like you cannot translate word to word. So that's what this part, like NLP people, they deal with this part. Like you cannot translate word to word in order to translate, say, from Hindi to English. Like it will seem odd. So you need to have proper translation. So for that, people are working on this area. It's a hot area in research. And then weather prediction, which we're trying to do last week. So most of the like you can say, at least you can say in IIT, many people, they try to focus on the application side of the machine learning, which is very much important. But then why should we have a look at the theoretical side? Okay, so sometimes it's always good to analyze the algorithms mathematically so that we can see actually how efficient is it. And then sometimes the theoretical study can give us some kind of insights, like maybe the actual problem in our hand cannot be solved directly or so easily, but if we assume some kind of simple model of the original problem, we can come up with some kind of algorithms, and it can be helpful in designing some practical algorithms instead of just randomly doing something, it's better to have some insight into that problem. And obviously it helps us to understand the difficulty of the problem. And it sometimes it happens that you you say you design some kind of heuristic or some practical algorithm, and you start observing some kind of patterns or some kind of good results you observe. So uh, it's always good that if you can justify that good result with help of some mathematics, like using some probability or statistics or linear algebra stuff, so that you can say, okay, because of so mathematical reasons, and and because the algorithm is satisfying so and so criteria, that's why it's good giving such output. And you based on that insight, you might try to improve that algorithm even further. So how does a typical learning problem look like? So uh, so say we are concentrating on spam filtering. Okay, so our goal is to create a spam filter. Basically, if an email comes, your algorithm has to say whether the algorithm is a spam or not. Okay, so there are two ways. One way is you directly write a program, and you um, you directly write a program and you try to classify whether it's a spam or not. But this kind of direct programs are actually not efficient. These kind of direct programs are not efficient because if the adversary sort of learns how the program works, then he can start giving some adversarial, like he can give examples which can beat your program, and all the spam mails will be classified as non-spam. So that's a problem which we have in our hand. So instead, we try to design a general purpose learning algorithm which is able to classify the new messages based on the data which it read till now. So based on that data, it will try to like produce a prediction rule which will hopefully, like with very high chances of success, it can give tell us whether it is a spam or not. Like even like you might see sometimes, like this obviously our machine learning algorithm won't be 100% accurate, and it is wrong to expect the machine learning algorithms to be 100% accurate, but we want the accuracy to be high as possible, like maybe 95%, 99%, so of that sort. And you might have observed sometimes, like sometimes our ERP mails go into spam. So sometimes it can classify even non-spam messages as spam in a wrong way. So obviously there will be errors, but machine learning algorithm then learns, like you say to the program that no, ERP mails are not spam. So then the machine learning algorithm learns it, and then from the next time maybe it will not classify your ERP mails as no, spam. So let's focus to the mathematical side. So to study machine learning mathematically, so you need to sort of define a learning problem, and this particular or this precise definition which you are giving for this learning problem is called a learning model actually. So defining your problem and then studying about it, all of it constitutes under a model which we sort of generalize it as learning model. So your learning model should answer some questions. So what are the questions? First, it should answer what are you trying to learn, like, and then from how is the data being generated, like from where it is coming, and so then how is the data presented to learner, like is all the data available to learner at once, or does it come one by one, like during the last week we saw the data is coming one by one, but even the data can come as a bunch. So that depends from model to model. So that last week's model was online model. And what do we intend to do from the things which we tried to learn? So these are the sort of four thumb rules which we try to address while like defining a defining a learning model. Okay. So, before we get into a learning model, let's go through some definitions which are quite standard, and uh, you I hope like these are quite simple definitions. So please keep in mind, if you have any, like by chance if you forget about the definition, just keep a message in the chat section so that I can tell what does that definition mean, if in case you forget in the future slides. So, so what is an example, or which is sometimes called an instance, is the object that is being classified. So in spam filtering, our email is an example. So an example can have some set of attributes, which in when it comes to mathematical terms, we define it by variables, and when it comes like you want to assess it physically or something like that, it is known as features. So suppose if you're doing medical diagnosis, then a patient might be described by the attributes such as gender, age, weight, blood pressure, body temperature. So based on these attributes, your prediction rules might change. Like if like you like obviously, like if your age is 50 and your age is 20, then based on that your algorithm has to behave in a different way. So, uh, so generally, if to keep a model simple, we tend to keep just one attribute, and in future you can go multiple attributes. And we use one term which is called label, which is the category in which we are trying to predict. Like for example, for spam filtering, we want to see whether we want to say whether the labels are spam or not. So spam, non-spam, these are all labels. So during training, so remember during training, the learning algorithm is supplied with labeled examples. So you're given examples, like you're given males, and you're even given the fact that whether the males are spam or not spam. So that is the period of training. Okay. And while testing, only unlabeled examples are given. Like only emails are given, and now you have to guess whether the emails are spam or not spam. Okay. Okay. So to make things easy, for now, let us assume that there are only two labels. The labels are either 0 or 1, and we'll make a simplifying assumption that there is a one-to-one mapping from examples to labels. Okay, so that such mapping is called a concept. So if you assume x to be your domain space of examples and 0 1 to be the range, then our concept is basically a function from x to 0 comma 1. So uh, yeah, basically, okay, it's a function, not bijection. So it's a function. Just so many, like obviously it's a and it won't be a bijection. It's a function. So basically, a concept C is a function, and a collection of such concepts we call it as concept class. And in many places, we tend to assume, to make a model easy, that our unknown concept is coming from some known concept class. So initially our aim will be to predict what that unknown concept is, and we'll assume that it's coming from a known concept class. And it's a very big assumption, I know, but yeah, for simplification, like, to begin our discussions, we'll initially assume that yeah, this is the model class from which, say, concept class from which our unknown concept is coming. So the aim is to deduce what the concept is. Just a second. Okay. Uh, okay. So let us look at our first model. Okay, which we call as consistency model. And to be honest, this is actually uh, less of a learning algorithm and more of a programming you can say. You'll understand why I mean it in such way. So uh, just look at these terms carefully. So we say that a concept class C is learnable in the consistency model uh, if there is a algorithm A which when given any set of labeled examples x1 y1 up to xm ym. So basically you are you are given some examples and you're given the labels with it. Okay, so you're given this particular trained examples. So we say that a concept class C is learnable if we can find a concept C from the class capital C that is consistent with the examples. It means that whenever like we find a function sort of such that whenever we plug these values, it will match its label. So that's what we mean by consistency. Or we'll say correctly that there is no such concept or there is no such function. So I guess you might have encountered such problems before also, like maybe while dealing with some maths Olympiad, like we try to see which function fits our value and such. So so it's sort of it's a fitting, like you want to find a function which sort of satisfies all your examples which have been given to you, like the trained examples which have been given to you. So this is quite a this quite simple model, and there are many drawbacks. But before going to drawbacks, let us have a look at one of the example, and so that you get a clear clarity by what do we mean by this model. Okay, so uh, assume that our set X is a set of some bit vectors of length n. Like by bit vector I mean this, like 1001 is a bit vector of length n. Like here it is is of length 5. So like this, if we have n bits, so it's a bit vector. So our examples are bit vectors, and what we want to do, we want to classify them as either true or false, okay, or 0 or 1. So given a bit vector, I want to say that it's either true or it's either false, or in terms of binary it's either 1 or it's either 0. So I want this sort of classification. So what can be our concept class? Like we have in this consistency model, as I told, we want a concept class uh, like basically, as I told, concept class is a set of functions. So so we want to assume a class of function, and you'll use our learning model to identify the function which is required to classify our bit vectors. So I hope it's clear till now. So let us assume that our concept class C is a set of monotone conjunctions. So let me properly explain what do I mean by monotone conjunctions. So uh, suppose we have some attributes, say z1, z2, z3, z4, z5, and so on. So basically, uh, each position of this vector x, like this bit vector, represents one attribute. So z1, z2, z3, z4, z5. Okay, and we say what is a monotone conjunction? Monotone conjunction is something of this type: z1 and z2. So z1 and z2 is part of C, but z1 and z2 bar, this is not part of C. So we'll have our set C of only this type, z1 and z2. So I'll explain how we are assigned. Like it's very easy. So suppose we give suppose my let me explain with one example. Suppose my the function which we are targeting, like we are trying to find, is z1 and z2. So my bit vector will give 1 as the answer if both z1 and z2 is 1. Otherwise, it's not going to give my answer as 1, it will give my answer as true. So we are trying to find this type of formula which will help me classify based if we are given a bit vector. So I hope you are clear what are we trying to find here. We are trying to find a formula of this type. And to keep our discussion simple, we are not allowing any kind of negation. Okay, we are only allowing z1 and z2 and so on. And each position of a bit vector represents one z. So I like it like here. So like okay, yeah, yeah.
Hello. Actually, I have the same doubt as
Okay.
Madhusudan Reddy that is in the concept class Z1 conjunction Z3 is also there. Like it should not be consecutive, or is there a rule that there should be
It
consecutive?
includes every possible clause actually. Every possible, yeah,
Okay.
in every possible clause is there in this.
The condition is that none should be negated and there should be
Yeah,
conjunction only.
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good point. So always we can brute force and find it, but we want something better. Like uh, yeah, monotone means only Z1 and Z2 is there. Like we don't have Z2 bar. I hope it's clear, Madhu. Like if every position represents one Z, yeah, okay. So uh, the physical essence, like we can have in this fashion, like Z1 represents that it is a bird, Z2 represents it's a mammal, Z3 represents that it lays eggs, Z4 represents that it can fly, and Z5 represents that it gives birth. So these are, like, you can say, five attributes of some animal, you can say, and that animal is represented by X. So if X is equal to 10100, it means that it is a bird that lays eggs, but it is not a mammal, and also it does not satisfy the last two conditions. So that's what my, like, you can say, the physical intuition of 10100. And as I told, like suppose we have a monotone conjunction Z2 and Z3. So a monotone conjunction is true only if all the Boolean variables within it are true, and if it is empty, then it's also true. Like if we don't have, like, it can be empty also. So what is our aim? Our our aim is that given a bit vector, we have to classify whether it is 1 or 0. So that's our aim. And initially we'll be given some examples, like some bit vectors are 1 and some bit vectors are 0, and then from after seeing these examples, we have to predict in future, like if we get a new bit vector, whether it will be 0 or 1. So uh, the algorithm is quite simple. So what we do, I'll explain it here. No, like this just verbals. I'll just explain it here. So suppose just have a look at those examples where the output is 1. Okay, and then so this you can, like, the first bit you can represent, like you can say it's Z1. The second bit you can say it is Z2, and so on. Okay. So what we do bitwise AND. So look at one column and you do AND. So here in the first column we have 0 and 1 and 1. So it's 0. In the second column it will be 1. In the third column it's 0. Fourth column it's 0, and fifth column it will be 1. So now just see which variables or which columns are 1, like after doing that bitwise and we see that it's Z2 and Z5, okay, which are completely 1. So you can say it's sort of reasonable to expect that my function is Z2 and Z5. Okay, it's quite reasonable to expect, like you can just figure, it's very logical why I chose this as the function, because you can see only when these two are 1, they are 1. Otherwise it is 0. Yeah. Okay, we can have a look at this afterwards. But here we can see that other variables are taking both 1 and 0. Okay. So it means that that particular term cannot come in my formula. So what we are doing, whichever term is always 1, we are just choosing them. It is possible that my function is just z2 or just z5. So it's highly possible. But uh, but for now, let's assume that it's z2 and z5. So and it's so here if you see this particular example, now if you try to substitute this in this particular function, it's satisfying because 0 and 1 is 0, so it's correct, and 1 and 0 is 0, so it's correct. So this particular formula fits perfectly uh, with this thing actually, with this example. So we say that this is a consistent concept. It means that it's consistent with all these given examples. So we declare it as our concept which we're trying to find. And we if you just chose z2 or z5, then like if you just chose z2, then this example would fail, because then if it was just z2, then it should give 0 as it should give 1 as the answer, but it's just giving 0. So I hope you get how I am finding this formula. So it's quite logical way to find the formula, and sometimes it's possible that we cannot find any such formula, like here. Like I've just added 0 1 0 0 1 to this example here. Okay, so obviously z2 and z5 satisfies this, but it is not able to satisfy this last example. And as we can see, in this case, we cannot find any other formula. So it sort of implies that our assumption of choosing, the set of functions as monotone conjunctions is sort of wrong. Okay, here. Okay. Sorry, here. So that's what the drawback is. The drawback is that if we know that our set of, like our function is from a particular class of function, then we are fine. We can always design an efficient algorithm and fine. But that's actually not learning actually. That's like sort of properly writing some kind of program. Like the system is not learning anything. So in that case, we are not able to do any kind of generalization. Like it's sort of dependent on problem to problem. Like we cannot generalize it over some problems. And this particular thing, the model does not allow noise. So what do I mean by noise? So by noise I mean it is highly possible that because of some error or like something, like because of some miscalculation or something, this thing turns out to be wrong. Like this particular data is not actually representing its actual value. It is possible, but it might be possible with very low probability. So just I'm saying it's possible, and it happens in the real data. Like maybe if you give a picture of bottle and someone has classified it by mistake as something else, like toy or something. So those are erroneous data, and you cannot always try to like find, in this case function or in other cases, some kind of method which fits all the answers, and it's not even desirable. It should fit most of the answers but not all the answers. So that's why we might have some erroneous data and stuff. So that's why we must be able to accommodate such noises. And you can see, if these data were 100% correct, then yeah, it's 100%, the overall method is absolutely right, given that we have guessed the correct model, correct class actually. But in general, there is no justification why this algorithm will perform properly. and we don't have any mathematical evidence. Like suppose these were randomly attributed, like these were not conjunctions, these were just randomly, like randomly I'm keeping 1010 something, then in no way we can use our this consistency model and claim that yeah, I'm mathematically quite good and stuff. So that's why this model fails. That's why we have to always look for some other kind of model, and that's where we start our actual sort of mathematical in like insight. Like we try to incorporate probability and statistics and other kind of maths into our algorithm. Like last week we saw one algorithm which was heavily involving some probability. So we need some kind of guarantee, mathematical guarantee, like irrespective of how my input is given, I'm going to be very like quite close to the actual possible prediction. So before, yeah,
Question.
that was any.
Yeah, so can you please go to the consistency model slide once? I have a
Yeah,
small
yeah,
issue.
yeah. This one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this one. So, given any concept class, so uh, a concept class is learnable if there exists an algorithm that
yeah,
does
yeah,
this, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Now, given any concept class, isn't there a brute force
yeah, yeah.
brute force algorithm
Yeah,
that
yeah,
does
yeah.
this?
There is a brute force. Yeah, there is
So,
a brute force algorithm. Yeah.
yeah. So, doesn't it mean that any concept class is learnable under this model?
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point. So that's why what generally this model means is that we have to learn it in polynomial time.
Okay, like if the model is infinite or something that stops us from brute
Yeah,
forcing, then
yeah, not even infinite, but it's exponentially large actually.
yeah, like this definition doesn't talk about
Yeah,
the efficiency of the algorithm.
as such, this definition doesn't talk, but in general, the thumb rule is we only consider those models as learnable, which are like sort of solvable in polynomial time. Like here in order to find this conjunction, we could have gone through all the uh, possible clauses actually. Like there are exponential number of clauses possible. Like if there are n bits, then there are 2 to the power n clauses possible, and we could have always done brute force over that. But we don't want 2 to the power n. We just want to have a very simple like polynomial algorithm such as this thing which we were doing here. This is quite simple, like we are just doing order and something like that. So I get what I mean actually. Yeah, that's
Okay.
what it means. Like we don't want to do complete brute force, like we have, it should be done in some polynomial time actually. And it's sort of and these algorithms, as you can see, as such are not correct like proper machine learning algorithms. They are just normal algorithms which are like sort of aimed to solve some fixed problems actually. So we are actually not learning anything, we are just solving the stuff like by like just defining some class. So that's why, so this is not an actual learning model. So that's what it that's what the drawback is actually. So if just is a sort of revision, because there are some first years here, so in case they don't know what exactly probability distribution is, like I'll just give a layman's explanation. So you can say you have IQ here. So IQ ranges from say 0 to 150, and this is a curve actually. See, we say that this is our probability distribution curve, and uh, so this is a probability distribution curve, and suppose we want to find that how what is the probability that the IQ will be between 120 and 140. We simply find the area of the curve in this red region, like under the curve in this red region. So that will be the probability. So generally we are the set of like the examples which we are taking is from a probability distribution. So what is the probability that it will be set of, suppose set of IQs will be coming between 120 and 140, it's 0.08, the probability is there. So so this is just a layman's introduction, and for today's discussion uh, you do need not even know the in-depth knowledge of that, but for the next discussion, if you have a sort of an idea what probability distribution means, then it will be great. So in layman terms, again I say, probability distribution is just sort of like it's sort of a curve, you can say, if you see graphically, and which helps us to say between a particular region, like suppose I take an person. So I want to answer this question: what is the probability that the IQ will be between 120 and 140? So this probability distribution defines a probability that, okay, between 120 and 140, the area under the curve is the probability. So it's something like that. So this is just a layman definition. Okay. So as we were, so let us come back to, like, see how can we design some better learning model. Okay. So as we saw last in the last model, we didn't look at the accuracy of our predictions, or we didn't even see from where the data was coming, like which type of data is coming, and so so we need to know this thing actually to make some kind of prediction, okay, on our data. If the data is too arbitrary, then we cannot make any type of prediction, like on like whether our model is working, like is correct or not. So in general, we assume that our examples, the trained examples, is coming from some distribution. Okay. Okay, we assume that the data is coming from some distribution, but our model or our algorithm doesn't know what that distribution is. For some learning algorithms, they assume that, yeah, we even know from which distribution it's coming. But for now, let's assume that we don't know from what distribution our trained examples are coming, and the trained examples and the testing examples both come from the same distributions. Like if they both come from very different distributions, then it's high, like it will always, most of the times it will lead to an incorrect prediction. Okay, so that's why we assume that probably like in terms of probability, they come from same distribution. Like it means that they have the same curve. It means that define the same probability. Okay, so we assume that there is a concept C, like there is there is a mapping, there is a function which labels the example, but we don't know about the function, and we even don't know about the class. So that's a very big thing. Like we don't know about the class. If we know about the class, then as many of you raised it, we can just do a brute force and we can find it. So and that's not learning actually, because when we are learning, we don't know from which type of function set it is coming. So we try to sort of find a nearby function, like sort of predict as accurately as possible. Okay, so as we said that if our training data is random, okay, then there is always a small possibility that our data will be some unrepresentative. What do I mean by this? Let me explain you with the help of coin tossing. Okay, so suppose you want to find, suppose you have two coins, okay, and you want to find which coin gives you highest heads. Okay, so so highest heads. So you observe that if you toss first coin for 1,000 times, and if you observe that you get 600 times heads, and if you toss second coin and you observe that you get 400 times heads, so you will be inclined to say that, yeah, the first coin is has more chances of getting heads than tails. But due to some, like due to randomness, it is always possible, because the probability of heads is not zero. It has some probability. So there is a chance, but it's a very low chance, that every coin toss can be heads for the second coin. Okay, every coin toss can be an head. So it can happen that 900 out of 1,000 is heads, or 1,000 out of 1,000 is an head. But the chances of such stuff happening is quite low. So that's why So that's why I mentioned that there is always a small possibility delta. Okay. So so what do we aim then in this section? We don't aim that hx should be equal to cx. Like if our actual function is cx and we are trying to predict hx, like we are trying to predict this and our prediction is some function hx, we don't aim to find like for every x hx should be equal to cx. What we try to do is that the probability that hx is not equal to cx, let us say it's an error of h. Okay, so that error probability is upper bounded by some epsilon. Okay, so that's what we are trying to find. Okay, so that's when we say that our model is approximately correct. Okay, and so so there can be uh, a good chance that our data can be sometimes too erroneous, that it's even tough to bound with some upper bound. Okay, it's quite tough to bound with some upper bound. So we'll look at the model and I'll just introduce the model today and leave it, which is probably approximately correct, which is called PAC. So this is probably approximately correct model. So just let me take you through the algorithm. Not algorithm, I mean the general picture of what we try to find, and this is the last slide which we'll be discussing. So we say C and H are concept classes, but they are not necessarily same. Okay, so we don't know C, but H is what we assume. Okay, so we say that C is PAC learnable by H if obviously there should exist an algorithm A, and for every function which we take in C, and for every constant epsilon and delta greater than 0. So this is for every possible stuff. So we have a distribution from which our examples are coming. Okay, and from there we take some polynomial number of examples, which is polynomial in 1 by epsilon and polynomial in 1 by delta. Okay, and this is a training set which we'll get. Okay, so after having a look at this training set, I produce a function. Okay, so I want this thing to happen. So probability that my error is less than epsilon, like error probability. So error probability is one thing here, and probability that error probability will be less than epsilon is greater than 1 minus delta. So we want this thing, and this probability is over the choice of S. Okay, so it might happen for one choice of S my error probability is less than delta, for another choice of S my error probability can be more than delta, but the chances of my error probability being more than delta is quite low, like it's sort of upper bounded by delta. Okay, so that's what I try to aim in this section, and that's why this model is called probably approximately correct. This is the probably part and this is the approximately correct part, so that's why we call it as probably approximate correct. And if suppose A is randomized, then we take into account of A's randomization also, but in general we neglect that randomization, and for now we try to look at some algorithms which are deterministic. Okay, so we just look at so our probability is just based on this choices S. Okay, so this is the new learning model, and next week we have a look at one example where we'll try to find the like sort of answer such that this particular inequality is satisfied. Like, okay, so I can tell the problem, it's quite simple. So okay, so the problem is like you have a number line and you have a point on the number line. Say the point is C, like it represents a value C, and if any number has value more than C, we say that we'll label it as 1, and if any value has, if any number has value less than c, we'll label it as 0. So we want to find we sort of try to predict c, so that we can properly predict which one to be assigned 1 and which one to be assigned 0. So the problem is simple, and analysis will be also simple. So we'll have a look at this particular model next week. So okay, the sources I have taken. Okay, I have taken this from the Princeton website. As Madhu is citing. Okay, I'll add these sources also. I've taken this from Princeton, their theoretical ML course. So basically, Princeton is considered to be the hub of theoretical computer science for machine learning. So if any one of you is interested in higher studies for theoretical ML, Princeton is the place. So does anyone have any kind of query, or otherwise we can end this discussion here? So I guess everything is fine, right? Guess. Yeah. Okay then. Okay then. We'll meet next week, Thursday, during this time itself. Yeah. If you have any suggestions, you can ping me personally. Thank you then.